If you have ever tried to lose weight through diet and exercise, you may have noticed that one particular type of fat refuses to cooperate. The deep belly fat that sits inside your abdominal cavity, surrounding your organs. This is visceral fat, and it is arguably the most metabolically dangerous fat in the body. Today, we are going to look at the science behind why deep abdominal breathing, practiced consistently on an empty stomach, can help shift your body's internal environment toward one that makes visceral fat easier to break down. This is not a claim that breathing alone melts fat away. The science is more precise, more interesting, and ultimately more empowering than that. Let us start with a fact that surprises most people, including many healthcare professionals. When your body burns fat, where does the fat go? A 2014 paper, published in the British Medical Journal, calculated the answer using basic biochemistry. Fat cells store energy primarily as triglycerides, molecules made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. When your metabolism breaks down a triglyceride molecule, 84% of the mass is converted into carbon dioxide, which leaves the body through the lungs every time you exhale. The remaining 16% becomes water, excreted through sweat, urine, and breath moisture. When you lose 10 kilograms of fat, 8.4 kilograms of that mass has been exhaled as carbon dioxide. Your lungs are the primary excretory organ for fat. This connection is important because it means every breath you take is part of the fat loss equation. When deep breathing significantly increases the volume of air you move per minute, both on the inhale and especially on the exhale, you are enhancing the efficiency with which your body exports the carbon dioxide that is the endpoint of fat metabolism. To understand why an empty stomach matters, you need to understand insulin's role in fat metabolism. When you eat, blood glucose rises and your pancreas releases insulin. Insulin performs many functions, but one of its most powerful effects is to switch off lipolysis, the process by which fat cells release fatty acids into the bloodstream for use as fuel. While insulin is elevated, your fat cells are essentially locked. Their hormone-sensitive lipase enzyme, the primary trigger for releasing stored fat, is inhibited. In the fasting state, typically about 2 to 4 hours after your last meal, blood glucose falls. Insulin drops, and glucagon-insulin's functional opposite rises. Glucagon actively signals fat cells to release fatty acids. The fatty acid lock is lifted. This is the biochemical state in which your body most readily uses fat as fuel. Fasting also promotes a modest increase in growth hormone, which further supports lipolysis and muscle preservation. Exercising or engaging in any physically activating practice during this window, before the first meal of the day, places you in a biochemical environment where fat oxidation is genuinely favored. Visceral fat has a specific vulnerability that distinguishes it from subcutaneous fat. Research has found that visceral fat cells carry approximately 4 times more cortisol receptors than subcutaneous fat cells. Cortisol, the primary stress hormone, secreted by the adrenal glands, binds to these receptors and triggers fat storage signals inside visceral fat tissue. Chronically elevated cortisol actively promotes visceral fat accumulation, while simultaneously suppressing lipolysis. Cortisol also drives insulin resistance over time, meaning blood insulin levels remain higher than they should, compounding the fat lock effect. For many adults living with chronic workplace stress, poor sleep, and irregular schedules, this creates a self-reinforcing cycle. High cortisol pushes fat into the visceral depot. High cortisol drives insulin resistance. Elevated insulin prevents that fat from being released. The visceral fat mass grows while becoming increasingly resistant to mobilization. A randomized controlled trial published in the journal Frontiers in Psychology studied the effect of diaphragmatic breathing training on cortisol and cognitive function in healthy adults. 40 participants were divided into a breathing training group and a control group. The training group completed 20 sessions of diaphragmatic breathing over 8 weeks, with each session consisting of 15 minutes of resting breathing, followed by 15 minutes of slow, deep diaphragmatic breathing at approximately 4 breaths per minute. The control group received no intervention. At the end of 8 weeks, salivary cortisol levels were significantly lower in the breathing group. compared to baseline, while the control group showed no significant change. The training group also showed reduced negative affect and significantly improved sustained attention. This was not a subjective sense of feeling calmer. It was a measurable reduction in a key stress biomarker. The physiological pathway through which this happens runs through the autonomic nervous system. The diaphragm is densely innervated by branches of the vagus nerve, the longest nerve in the body, and the primary conduit of the parasympathetic nervous system. When the diaphragm contracts slowly and fully, it stimulates vagal afferent fibers that send signals to the brainstem. Slow breathing at around 6 breaths per minute activates the arterial baroreceptors in the aorta and carotid arteries, maximizing baroreflex sensitivity and parasympathetic tone. Research published in the journal Hypertension confirmed that slow breathing at 6 breaths per minute significantly increases baroreflex sensitivity and reduces sympathetic activity. When the parasympathetic system is activated, the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis that drives cortisol secretion, is suppressed. Cortisol drops. As cortisol drops, the hormonal environment in visceral fat tissue becomes less favorable for fat storage and more favorable for fat release. Beyond cortisol, vagus nerve activation triggers what researchers call the cholinergic anti-inflammatory pathway. Visceral fat is not simply a passive energy storage depot. It functions as a metabolically active endocrine organ that secretes pro-inflammatory cytokines, including TNF-alpha, interleukin-6, and interleukin-1 beta. This chronic low-grade inflammation from excess visceral fat promotes insulin resistance, which in turn makes the fat even harder to mobilize. Another vicious cycle. Vagal efferents release acetylcholine, which binds to receptors on immune cells and suppresses the production of these pro-inflammatory cytokines, restoring and strengthening vagal tone through regular diaphragmatic breathing practice may help interrupt this inflammatory cycle that maintains visceral fat resistance. Every full contraction of the diaphragm compresses the abdominal organs. Every relaxation releases that pressure. This rhythmic compression and decompression of the intestines, liver, stomach, pancreas, and the fat tissue surrounding them acts as a form of internal massage. This increases local blood flow and lymphatic circulation within the abdominal cavity. Greater blood flow means that lipolytic hormones such as glucagon, growth hormone, and catecholamines have better access to the surface of visceral fat cells. The fatty acids released from those cells can more efficiently enter the circulation for transport to working muscle and liver tissue, where they will be oxidized to carbon dioxide and water. The diaphragm, with its direct anatomical relationship to the surrounding visceral mass, turns every deep breath into a stimulus for improved abdominal circulation. A review published in 2025 in the journal Curious documented that excess abdominal fat physically pushes the diaphragm cranially, reducing its range of motion and leading to progressively shallower, faster breathing. This creates a feedback loop in which visceral fat weakens the diaphragm. The weakened diaphragm disrupts autonomic balance. Disrupted autonomic balance elevates cortisol and promotes insulin resistance, and elevated cortisol and insulin resistance facilitate further visceral fat accumulation. Intentional diaphragmatic breathing training breaks this cycle at a fundamental level. The core technique is straightforward. Sit with your spine upright and your shoulders relaxed downward. Place one hand on your lower abdomen, below the navel. Breathe in slowly through your nose for a count of 5 to 7 seconds, allowing your lower abdomen to expand outward as the diaphragm descends. Then exhale slowly through your nose for a count of 7 to 10 seconds, feeling your abdomen gently drawing inward. The exhale should always be longer than the inhale, as this extended exhalation maximally activates the parasympathetic response. At this breathing rate, you will complete 3 to 5 breaths per minute, which is the range that research consistently identifies as producing the strongest autonomic benefits. Practice this for 5 to 10 minutes in the morning before eating anything. Caution is warranted for beginners. Breathing too fast or forcing excessively deep breaths can cause hyperventilation. Too much carbon dioxide is blown off, causing dizziness, tingling in the hands and face, or lightheadedness. If this happens, slow down, breathe normally for a moment, or gently cup your hands over your mouth to rebreathe some exhaled air. Always start with just 3 to 5 minutes and build gradually. People with hypertension, cardiovascular disease, chronic respiratory conditions, or who are pregnant should consult their physician before beginning a structured breathwork practice. Let us be precise about what 5 minutes of morning diaphragmatic breathing actually does. It does not directly burn a clinically significant quantity of visceral fat. In those 5 minutes, the caloric expenditure of 5 minutes of quiet breathing is small. What it does do, when practiced consistently, is reduce cortisol, enhance vagal tone, improve insulin sensitivity, promote abdominal circulation, and set the hormonal tone for the hours that follow. These are the physiological preconditions for fat mobilization. They make the hormonal and metabolic environment of your body more receptive to releasing visceral fat throughout the rest of the day, especially in combination with an appropriate diet and regular physical activity. The impact accumulates over weeks and months. Studies on diaphragmatic breathing show that effects on cortisol, HRV, and autonomic balance strengthen with consistent practice. Daily practice is what converts a temporary physiological shift into a durable change in resting autonomic tone. Start tomorrow morning. Before coffee, before your phone, sit quietly for 5 minutes. Breathe into your lower abdomen. Exhale slowly and fully, and give your nervous system the signal that today begins. Not in a state of threat and urgency, but in a state of calm and recovery. Over time, that signal reshapes your hormonal environment, and your body's relationship with visceral fat changes along with it. If this video was useful to you, please like and subscribe. And share it with someone who is working hard on their health, but keeps hitting walls. Leave a comment below about whether you are already practicing deep breathing or starting today. We will see you in the next video.